Hi, I want to try to keep this video short. I don't have a script for this, I just have a very rough outline that I put together, so if I sound frazzle-brained and all over the place, it's because I am, and I'm sorry for that. There's a lot to talk about with the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake that just got announced. There's a lot of could talk about that, but the one thing that I do want to talk about right now is the lack of Paper Mario 64, because to me, it made more sense to me for them to remake Paper Mario 64 first, because it's the first game, and it needs a remake more, so I was a bit confused that they actually did decide to do Thousand Year Door first, but after thinking about it, it does make a lot more sense. I don't think anyone should be under the impression that Nintendo forgot about Paper Mario 64, because they absolutely did not, and there is a lot of evidence hiding in plain sight as to why, so I'm gonna go over that in this video. So while for the most part this appears to be a pretty one-to-one remake of the Thousand Year Door, there's definitely a lot of slight differences that we can point out, and a surprising amount of them are directly related to Paper Mario 64. So the first one that I want to talk about is the framed photo in Mario's house that has all of the Paper Mario 64 party members in it. But not only is it a reference to Paper Mario 64, but it's also a reference to Super Paper Mario, the game after this one, because that is where that photo came from. That also has a picture of the Thousand Year Door party members on it. It's a nice little way to link the original trilogy together, and that photo was not in the original Thousand Year Door. This is something that they purposefully added in this remake. So that's an intentional reference to 64. Another thing about 64 in this trailer is the fact that we hear the Paper Mario 64 title theme in the beginning of it. Now this theme is not heard at all in Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. It's only in the first game, so it's very strange that it's here. So go ahead and listen to that very quickly. Now, as you can tell, that was not just the original theme just put in the trailer. That was a new remix of the Paper Mario 64 title theme that is apparently going to be in the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake. And if that's the case, where is it going to play? So we'll get to that a bit later, but the next thing I want to point out is the fact that there is a map on the wall inside of Mario's house. And that map was not there in the original game. It's like this torn piece of paper there. But here in the remake, it is some kind of map. And if you look closely at it, you can tell that it is the Paper Mario 64 Mushroom Kingdom map. Now, I know it's a little blurry and kind of hard to tell, but looking at the land formation, it seems to line up pretty well, and the obvious correlation is Lava Lava Island in the bottom left of the map. There's no doubt in my mind that this is meant to be the Paper Mario 64 map. And again, was not there in the original game, so this was a conscious choice that they purposefully put in the new game. Now, the last thing I want to point out has to do with the exterior of Mario's house. In the original game, I didn't remember this very well, I had to go and look, but you can actually see the pipe to Toad Town to the right of Mario's house in the original Thousand Year Door, but it's not on screen for very long. In the remake, however, you can see it pretty darn clearly, and it's just much more apparent, I feel, in the remake. And, you know, you may think that's a bit of a stretch, because it's like, you know, it is technically still in Thousand Year Door, so obviously they would remake it. The fact that it is somewhat more apparent in the remake doesn't really mean a whole lot. But what is apparent in the remake is, actually here, why don't you take a look at the original exterior shot of Mario's house from Thousand Year Door. Good? You got it? Okay. Now look at the exterior shot from the remake. Do you notice anything different? That's right, the backside of Mario's house now has the addition on it from Paper Mario 64, which is Mario and Luigi's bedroom, and it also leads to the basement down there. That is not visible at all in Thousand Year Door, but it is visible now in the Thousand Year Door remake, even though it was only visible in Paper Mario 64. So why is it here now? The only reason I can think of for all of this stuff that they purposefully put into the remake is that Paper Mario 64 stuff will be in the game. Now, I don't mean that this is going to be a secretly like a 2-in-1 remake, because it doesn't make sense for them to not advertise it that way. But I do think that we may get a Paper Mario 64 remake sometime in the future, or at the very least, we're just going to have a bit more Paper Mario 64 stuff in this Thousand Year Door remake to kind of either hint towards a future 64 remake or just to kind of, you know, acknowledge it. We don't know for sure how much new stuff is going to be in this remake. They describe it as a visually enhanced version of the game. They don't necessarily necessarily confirm there's going to be anything new, but given that there's new stuff in the Mario RPG remake, I don't think it's entirely out of the question, and even if it wasn't as ambiguous as they're describing it, we know for a fact that there is some new stuff in this game because, as some people have pointed out, there is a new purple toad seen in Glitzville that was not in the original game, and not only is it, a new toad, but it's straight up a new character with a new outfit that we've never seen before on a toad. So that confirms that there is going to be new stuff in the game, even if it's just a little bit of stuff. But in terms of what that could mean for Paper Mario 64 stuff, I think we may see something like maybe a Toad Town post-game, or maybe you can actually go to Toad Town Harbor, and that's how Mario leaves to go to Rogueport, or maybe that's how you go to and from the Mushroom Kingdom and Rogueport in the post-game. But I think what we might see here during this supposed post-game, or maybe whenever you can just go to the Toad Town, is you'll be able to encounter the Paper Mario 64 party members. Now, if you don't know, in Thousand Year Door, there are unused sprites for all of the Paper Mario 64 party members, but only Parakarry and Lady Bow ended up actually being seen in the final game. So I think with a post-game or something like this, where you can actually explore a little bit of Toad Town from the first game, I think that would be a good opportunity to have that idea be fully realized, and you can talk and interact with the Paper Mario 64 party members. And I do kind of strongly believe that all this stuff is kind of hinting towards a Paper Mario 64 remake in the future. Assuming that is true, which it may not be, but assuming that is true, a question that is obviously going to be on everyone's minds is, if that's the case, why did they remake Thousand Year Door first? If they're planning to remake both of them, would it not make sense to remake the first game first? And I thought that too for the longest time before this was announced, but looking at it now, I think it actually makes a lot of sense, and it's for quite a few reasons. So, first of all, Thousand Year Door is the more popular game. That's just a fact. Secondly, Paper Mario 64 is on Nintendo Switch Online. You can already play it on the Switch, so they might have a bit more of a difficult time trying to convince people to buy a remake of a game that they can technically already play. And third, I think Thousand Year Door is probably the easier game of the two to remake, simply because, while I don't want to kind of undermine the work that they've clearly done for this remake, there's definitely reusing a lot of, I shouldn't say reusing, but they're refurbishing a lot of old assets. Like, a lot of the artwork pretty much looks exactly the same, whereas if they were to remake Paper Mario 64, that game has a completely different art style compared to all 5 of the other Paper Mario games. Like, it's completely different. They would have to do a lot more work to remake everything from the ground up. So I think because Thousand Year Door is the easier one to remake, and it's not on the Switch, and it is the more popular game, I think it makes perfect sense for them to skip Paper Mario 64 and just remake Thousand Year Door first. And it's not out of character for Nintendo to skip a game when it comes to remaking Mario RPGs, as they skipped Partners in Time to remake Bowser's Inside Story when it comes to the Mario and Luigi games. All of this to say that I think the Thousand Year Door remake is a bit of a test to see how much people truly want Paper Mario games to be like this. And if this remake sells well, then we're obviously probably going to get a new Paper Mario game with this classic gameplay style, and possibly even a Paper Mario 64 remake. And I think the thing that really sells this home for me is the very last bit of the trailer that shows the scene between Peach and Tech. Now, this is definitely a bit of a stretch. I think it's a stretch, admittedly. I may be reading a little too deep into this, but I was trying to understand why they specifically ended the trailer with that scene, because it's not something that's really exciting or anything. It's not something that you would really think to end a trailer with. So the way I kind of interpret it is that I feel that with Tech asking Peach to show him what it feels like to love, I feel like that could sort of represent Nintendo asking us to show our love, to prove our love that we've been yelling at them for years for about these games. I know that's not a perfect metaphor, but to be fair, it's dialogue that was written in like 2004, so it's obviously not going to match up perfectly. It's not like they're writing new dialogue specifically for this, so they probably just chose a scene that fits the situation the best. Or not, maybe I'm just crazy and just looking way too deep into things, but I don't know, it's just weird to me that they ended the trailer specifically with that. I know that doesn't really have anything to do with Paper Mario 64, but I think if we really show Nintendo that we love this game, we may have a bright future ahead of us for Paper Mario and for a Paper Mario 64 remake. So that's pretty much all I had to say. I'm looking forward to this game. Please buy it and ensure that it sells well. Thanks for watching.